Das ist Celine Dion und das ist mein Leben im Lux. Meine
Damen und Herren, Celine Dion.
Celine. Aus Caesars Palace.
17 Jahre lang hat Celine Dion etwas vor der Welt versteckt. Kein Skandal, keine Affäre, etwas viel Beängstigenderes. Es begann in ihrem Hals, der eine Ort, den sich eine Sängerin niemals leisten kann zu verlieren.
Und genau das passiert. Und es ist sehr schwierig für mich.
Es ist schwer mit anzusehen.
Sie schob es auf Müdigkeit. Sie schob es auf.
For most of her life, Celine Dion's voice was the one thing that never let her down. It carried her out of a crowded house in Charlemagne, Quebec, where she was the youngest of 14 children, and it carried her onto some of the biggest stages the world has ever built. But for nearly 2 decades, that same voice was quietly betraying her, and almost nobody knew. Celine has said that she began noticing strange symptoms years before she ever had a name for them. Muscle tightness, spasms that came without warning, moments where her throat simply refused to cooperate, no matter how hard she tried to push through it. At first, she assumed it was exhaustion. She had spent decades on stage, touring relentlessly, carrying the weight of a career built on flawless vocal control. It made sense, at least on the surface, to blame fatigue. So she rested when she could, pushed through when she couldn't, and kept the truth to herself. That silence lasted a long time. It wasn't until October 2021 that the cracks became impossible to hide entirely. She postponed the opening of a new Las Vegas residency, citing severe muscle spasms. A few months later, in early 2022, she canceled the remaining dates of her Courage World Tour for the same reason. The public got vague explanations and no real answers. Fans worried. Headlines speculated. But Celine still hadn't said the words out loud. That changed in December 2022, when she sat in front of a camera and told the world she had been diagnosed with stiff person syndrome, a rare neurological disorder that causes involuntary muscle spasms and progressive stiffness, often triggered by stress, sudden movement, or loud noise. It is not curable. It can be managed, sometimes well, sometimes not, but it does not go away. For a woman whose entire identity had been built around vocal precision and physical stamina on stage, that was about as frightening a diagnosis as one could receive. What she revealed over the next 2 years painted an even fuller picture. She has spoken about needing extremely high doses of medication just to walk normally or swallow without pain. She has described nights on stage, long before the diagnosis became public, where she turned the microphone toward the audience not out of generosity but because she wasn't confident her own voice would hold a note. It's a small detail, but it says a lot. For years, some of what looked like warmth toward her fans was also a survival tactic. In June 2024, Amazon released the documentary I Am, Celine Dion, and it changed the public conversation around her illness overnight. The film didn't soften anything. It showed her mid-seizure on a therapy table, fully conscious, unable to stop her body from locking up while her medical team worked to help her. It's a difficult scene to sit through, and by her own account, it was even harder for the people who loved her to watch it happen. She later said she wanted it left in the final cut anyway, because she wanted people living with invisible illnesses to feel less alone. Then, barely a month after that documentary reached audiences, Celine did something almost nobody expected. On July 26, 2024, during the opening ceremony of the Paris Olympics, she appeared high on the Eiffel Tower in the rain, dressed in a white gown, and sang Edith Piaf's Limia et l'amour live to a global audience of hundreds of millions. There was no safety net, no indoor climate control, no do-over, just a woman with an incurable neurological condition, standing in the weather, trusting a body that had failed her in public before. She got through the entire song. NBC's Kelly Clarkson called her a vocal athlete that night, and it's hard to argue with the description. That performance became a kind of quiet answer to a question a lot of people had been too polite to ask directly. Was Celine Dion done? A few months earlier, ahead of the documentary's premiere, a reporter had framed her absence from the spotlight as something final. Her response was 2 words: "I'm not dead." It's blunt, and it's honest, and it tells you something about how she has chosen to face this illness, not with denial and not with despair, but with a kind of stubborn insistence on staying in the fight. The next major chapter arrived on her 58th birthday, March 30th, 2026. In the days leading up to it, cryptic posters carrying only song titles started appearing around Paris, and a short, unexplained video surfaced online in her voice. Then, once again standing near the Eiffel Tower, she confirmed what fans had been hoping for, a return to live performance, this time as a full concert residency in Paris rather than a single ceremonial appearance. She described it as the best birthday gift of her life. In her announcement, she didn't claim to be cured, and she didn't pretend the illness was behind her. She said she was feeling good, feeling strong, a little nervous, and mostly grateful for the support that had carried her through the hardest years. The residency is set at Paris La Défense Arena, the largest indoor arena in Europe, and what started as 10 shows quickly grew. Demand for tickets was overwhelming. Millions of entries poured into the ticket lottery, and organizers added additional dates, eventually stretching the run into 2027. It is, by any measure, a major undertaking, dozens of shows, months apart, each one demanding the kind of sustained vocal and physical performance that her illness is specific. That's really the heart of why this comeback carries more weight than a typical one. Stiff person syndrome doesn't just make touring physically demanding in the ordinary sense. It can be triggered by exactly the things a live performance is built from: adrenaline, emotional intensity, sudden noise, physical exertion sustained over time. A single song on the Eiffel Tower is one kind of risk. A multi-night residency, repeated over more than a year, is something else entirely. It means facing those same triggers again and again, night after night, with no guarantee that any given show goes away the last one did. To her credit, nothing in how Celine has talked about this suggests she's ignoring that reality. She has been remarkably clear-eyed about what her body can and can't promise her. She's spoken about the discipline it takes just to get through daily tasks, let alone a full concert. She knows, probably better than anyone watching from the outside, exactly what standing on that stage in September will cost her physically, and she's choosing to do it anyway. Some of that choice seems tied to things beyond the stage itself. Her husband and longtime manager, Renee Angel, who discovered her as a child and shaped her entire career, died of cancer in January 2016. She has talked about how closely performing is tied to his memory, that being on stage keeps her connected to him in a way nothing else quite does. Her 3 sons have grown up watching her navigate grief and illness in full view of the world, and in her own words, walking away from music entirely wouldn't make the illness disappear. It would just mean living with it without the one thing that has always given her identity and purpose. So where does that leave things heading into September 2026? Nobody, including Celine, can say for certain how the residency will go. It's entirely possible this becomes one of the most talked about comebacks in modern music, proof that a chronic, incurable illness doesn't have to be the end of the story. It's also possible her body pushes back somewhere along the way, forcing a pause, a postponement, or worse, in front of the exact audience she fought so hard to return to. What's not really in question is her intention. She has said, in different ways over the past few years, that if she can't run, she'll walk, and if she can't walk, she'll crawl. The point being that stopping isn't really an option she's considering. Whatever happens across those Paris shows, she is walking into them with her eyes open, fully aware of both the risk and the reward, and choosing to stand in that spotlight anyway. That, more than any single lyrical performance, might be the most honest way to describe where Celine Dion is right now, not cured, not finished, and not interested in letting out the possibility have the last word.